you. I want to welcome everyone to another edition of the UCTSS webinar, and we're going to be discussing the topic managing protocol deviation in clinical trials. But before we go on, I would like us to mark a register. So please go to the chat box and say I am from Nigeria, Abuja, Nigeria. And I am Adejoke Jegede. So please go to the chat box. Let me see your hands so that I would know that you're with me as I am with you. Yes. Let me see the first person to do that. This is just, oh, I Blessing from Lagos. Good to have you here. Good to have you here. Can I get more? Hello, Hall. Isaiah, thank you from London. So excited to be here. That's fine. Adeshibumi from Ibadan, Nigeria. Thank you for joining us. One more person before I go on. Can we get one more person? Oh, hello. I'm from Ukraine. Thank you. That's Tetiana. Thank you so much for joining all the way from Ukraine. Okay, so hi, James from Nigeria. Thank you everyone for joining. It's good to have you on this session again. So we're going to be discussing practical insights from site operations and quality perspectives. We're going to be putting all of this into perspective today with great insights from very experienced professionals. Thank you very much, Sophie from Kenya. Good to have you here. So let me quickly go to the next slide so that we can cover as much as possible. Don't forget this webinar is brought to you by United Clinical Trial Support Services here in Nigeria and West Africa. Yes, so can we go to the first slide so that we kick off from here before I introduce our very experienced professionals? So we're looking at protocol deviation, and because of our early professionals would like to um, bring this to the barest minimum so that everybody can get as much as possible. So I'm going to start from what exactly clinical trial protocol is before we go into the deviation. So clinical trial protocol is a detailed blueprint of any clinical research. So it is the step-by-step master plan. It is a recipe, a rule book that ensures participant safety, it maintains scientific accuracy, and it guarantees that data is collected consistently. So any protocol to any clinical research is the pathway to that clinical research, to the success of the clinical research. Now let's go to the deviation. It is any change or any departure from that design. It is any change or any departure from that blueprint or the procedure. And it is defined, all of this is defined in the protocol. So when your protocol, your informed consent, your approval, and all of that, when you deviate from there, you have a protocol deviation. So it cuts across the regulatory basics, the key distinctions, the operational impact, and many more. Can I have the next slide, please? Okay, so why does this conversation matters? We have had a lot about clinical research and we've had a lot about protocols, but why this particular one matter is that it is one of the most common. It happens across almost, in fact, all trials. Statistics have shown us that even FDA statistics, clinical research statistics have shown us that deviations appear in at least one in every three enrolled patients situation. So on the average, we have about 119 deviations each per deviation. So please understand that it is not a small joke when you deviate from a protocol, and it's across board. It's not just a regional problem um, in the UK or in the Americas or in Africa. It cuts across every trial, whether it is regional or whether it is continental or wherever faces this challenge. So what we want to discuss today is how we can understand this challenge and how we can have solutions to them, mitigating them early so that we don't have, it does not lead to violation. Some of our speakers will identify and tell us the difference between the violation and the deviation so that we understand where we're coming from and where we're going to and how to differentiate them. Thank you very much, James. Can I have the next slide, please? Okay, so this session is going to be divided into three parts. We're going to be having insights from the speakers. We're going to be having questions from all of you. Please feel free to go to the chat box to engage one another and to drop your questions. If you have ideas, please put them. If you have any kind of experience with protocol deviation, please go ahead and put them there. And lastly, we're going to have the practical takeaways from all of our speakers. Thank you very much. Next slide, please. Okay, so I'm going to be introducing the first speaker for today. We have three um, experienced speakers. I'm going to take them one after the other. So I'd like to start with the first speaker. She's a clinical research project manager with over 10 years experience managing global clinical trials from early to late phases. And she has a strong knowledge and experience in therapeutic areas that includes general medicine, rare diseases, and oncology with a record of accomplishment in innovative and technology-driven studies. She's passionate about clinical research, about making it more accessible and impactful in Nigeria and in West Africa. And that has led her to find UCTSS and develop the technology called UCTMS. That's the United Clinical Trials Management System. So her name is Aize Onyoboria. She's going to be taking us in the operational aspects, perspective, and management of protocol deviations. Over to you, Ma. Thank you for the round of applause. Thank you.
Thanks,
Please go ahead.
everybody. Hello again. Hi, everybody. Thank you very much for, joining us on a Friday afternoon. I personally don't like meetings on a Friday afternoon. I think it's 1 o'clock by the time it's 4 o'clock anywhere in the world, isn't it? So, but I mean, we are here because, we want to learn from one another. We want to understand, how problems, emerge in trials. And when I use the word problem, I use them lightly because they are categorized and they are usually classed as protocol, deviations. And I call them problems or issues because I'm going to be speaking more from the clinical operations perspective, and operations basically, when people talk about operations, we have this grand structural thing in our head, but basically operation is telling you about people and processes, you're going to have people on clinical trials. I hope everybody knows that clinical trials is basically a group of people gathered together to see if a particular type of medicine works. So people looking at some medicine working, administering it to people, and it is being administered by people. All of these are all, encompassed within processes. So that's what clinical trials is. I've just put it in a very, very simple layman's term. So if you are thinking that wherever you have people and processes and you will not have problems or deviations, then that person may probably be staying in some village in place called utopia. But I'll move on quickly. So I'm going to be talking about managing protocol deviation from the operational perspective. How do you identify it? How is it classified? How is it reported? And what are the preventative measures that we can see? Next slide, please, James. Thank you. So the first thing we want to look at is that where does deviations come from? Where do they actually come from? Yes, please feel free to pause, jump in, raise your hand and ask me any question. I like our sessions to be very interactive. So please, if you have any questions as I speak, and if you feel I've misspoken, nobody knows it all, please also raise your hand and, correct me. Happy to be corrected. So where are deviations and where do deviations usually, emerge from? And as Adejoke already said, we're talking about protocol deviation. So that means you have a protocol, you have a plan, you have a blueprint on which you want to use to run the clinical trials. And this blueprint or this protocol usually comes with its own specific designs. The designs include, what are the type of visits that we're expecting from the patients, and what type of administrative drugs are we looking at? Are they going to be administered by IV? Is it going to be by tablets? Is it going to be in liquid form? Any sorts of, that. But one thing we all know that is that every clinical research requires a visit, whether it is a physical visit or it's like a remote visit or it's a virtual visit. Because why? The patients needs to be managed and they need to be, they need to be managed effectively and proactively, ensuring that they are following the guidelines or the visit specifications on every protocol. So the first place to start, and the first place that is usually a major issue, is that you find that, the visit windows. It's the first place because life happens. So if you set a visit window, for instance, that this patient will come and be receiving injection every 3 days, and within those 3 days, and usually, if, for instance, if it's an oncology study, a person that's suffering from cancer may be even too sick to come into the hospital, right? So they find a way, to accommodate them. So in such a situation, that type of deviation is more like, okay, they missed their visit window. It's more like a procedural thing. So this is not something that will break the bank. It's not something that's going to break the study, but it's something that needs to be documented, that when they are reviewing data, eventually you find that, okay, every patient has, all patients are meant to go through 3 days visit window at the hospital, for instance. And then you find that out of all of this data, there was one particular patient that was missing their visits by +2 or -3 days. So you have documented it. Anybody, the inspectors, the authorities will say, how come this patient is an outlier? Why do they have this? They'll say, okay, it's a deviation. Did you document it? You say, yes, you refer them to that place. So that's the first thing. Second thing, which is like a very big thing, is eligibility criteria violations. And you can see the difference in the use of the language. That we are not just saying eligibility criteria deviation, it is a violation. Because for a patient to be included in a study, they must be eligible. So if they are not eligible and they are included in the study, it is a violation. Now, there are primary requirements for a study. For instance, they'll say it's an adult study. All patients must be from 18 to 75 years old. And then you go and put a 16 years old there. That's a major violation. If they say they should weigh between 50 to 75 kg, you put a 100 kg person there. That's a major violation. The reason why these violations are the reason why eligibility criteria is a huge part of protocol deviations and why they are called violations is because, number one, you can expose that patient to some kind of levels of harm or safety issues. They can experience adverse events because for every study, there are specifications, there are requirements that fits that study design. And that is why you have a protocol to make sure that that is being guided and that is being streamlined effectively. So eligibility criteria violations is huge. You have inclusion criteria, you have exclusion criteria. Some studies may be negligible in terms of like exclusion. They'll say washout period should be like maybe 28 days. You find that maybe that patient, was 26 days. You'll be like, plus minus, it'd be like plus minus 26 days. It needs to be documented, but because the protocol itself, has outlined that the washout period should be like 28 days, things like that. Then informed consent failures, this is the worst. Uh, you can't add a patient to a clinical research without their consent. Number one. So even if you ask the patient in, and yes, you say you have consented them and you don't have the documents to show for it, and there's no confirmation. Number one, you don't have the documents to show for it. Number two, you don't have aligned dates. For instance, you say you have record that. Okay, I'm seeing a question from Vasha. So Vasha, I'll come back to you. Just give me a minute. So you have records where they say a patient visited the site or the day you met the patient and discussed the study with the site and everything, and they agreed to sign was maybe like 1st of May. And then the signature eventually that you see is 30th of May. That's a deviation on its own. But the one that would make it like, and then you have different categories. Vasha, we will be going into the different categories. So just maybe just give me a bit of patience and then we'll get there. So informed consent is massive. It goes beyond the just violation. It's important. It's critical. It's not just major. So you have major, you have important, you have non-important, you have minor, and then you have critical, which will literally break the study. I'm not sure if some of you joined our very first webinar where we spoke about one of the reasons why Nigeria was blacklisted for a long time. I speak from the context of Nigeria because I'm Nigerian, even though I do have an half UK, Nigeria, and I have a business in Nigeria. But my main focus is that we are trying to, attract attention and bring technical research, the knowledge of it, the capacity building and all of that. We try to bring it way more into West Africa and Nigeria. And one of the things we mentioned was that the reason why Nigeria was blacklisted was because of the big clinical trial that was conducted in Kano, northern Nigeria, with Pfizer on tuberculosis, where over 200 children or so died. And this was as a result of informed consent because they could not find the documentation. Pfizer was held liable because the authorities could not find enough documentation to confirm that these patients were actually properly consented. So it's not just the fact that it's a deviation, that was a major breach. So you have serious breach as well, which, at the end of the day can lead to the end of the trial. Yeah. And then we have missing assessments and procedures. Usually they are assessed per the context of what's happened. There are some assessments that must be included from the start of the study, looking at demography, looking at their medical history, things like that. All of this is dependent on what has been included in protocol. And if some of these missing assessments or procedures are not performed or not performed at the visit or outside the visit, it is required that they are documented as deviation. And then the big one is SAE, which is the serious adverse events. You have the expected ones, you have the unexpected ones. All of this, they again, they are usually listed within the protocol. And if the PI or the site staff, they are aware of this, and they do not follow the requirements or the guidelines of the protocol, they are identified as protocol deviation. So I've just given like a general highlight or general category of where deviations actually come from. I'll pause here if anybody has any questions at all. Yes, there was a question from Varsha. Joke, if you don't mind reading that out for me, please.
Okay. So, Vasha asked that what is the difference between major protocol deviation and protocol violation?
Yeah, so the difference is the major, right? The difference is the descriptive term that's been included in there. So a violation can be major, a deviation can be major, or it can be minor. But the important thing is that documenting them effectively and how again it is assessed. The categorization is mostly dependent on like the medics or the clinical leads within the study who understands the impact of the data that's just been missing because of the deviation, right? Or how it critically impacts the delivery of the endpoints of the study. So that's what actually causes that categorization, that you can look at it, you can assess it, you can determine that, yes, this will impact the study data, this will impact the outcome of the study, but will it break the study, which is critical? It's no. So, but it's like quite a huge thing as well, which is like, how it affects the study. So it requires, CAPA, where you now go and, set up like a corrective action and preventive action plan in place to make sure that that is corrected and that is not repeated again. So in such a case, CAPAs, are initiated. Varsha, I don't know if I answered your question, if that's clear, or if you need anything else. Thank you, York. I'm seeing that. Thank you very much. Yes. Vasha, are we good? If you're good, just give me a thumbs up and then I'll carry on. Perfect. Okay, so we're talking about classification, framework. Again, this is something that's usually defined across different organizations, but we have like the standard descriptions. If you go look into I think the E3, the ICH E3, there's a lot of descriptions that's there that you can use, but this is mostly like the general this is the general categories that you will find. It's either it's major or it's serious, and we've provided some examples there: wrong dose or incorrect treatment administered. In the case where wrong dose, incorrect treatment is administered, it could be critical because if it leads to death, then that's going to be a major thing. You need to report that, over to the authorities, and a lot of investigations, and it could lead to serious breach, and then that could lead to additional issues as well. So it's important that once it's identified that a wrong dose has been done, a lot of tests are performed. They collect biomarkers from the patient or samples, blood samples mostly from the patient. They conduct PV, and get all the results through. Eligibility criteria not verified, missed critical safety assessments, consent not obtained before procedures, unreported serious adverse event. Now, I want to go to that last point. Unreported is not just the fact that you had a serious adverse event, it's the fact that it's not reported. It's major. That is major because if you do not report it, whether you as the PI or you as the site person, in your mind, in your judgment, you have addressed the situation, but you've not reported it. If it's identified later, it becomes a serious breach because you exposed the patient to an adverse event. You determined the severity of it, but you did not report it effectively, which everybody knows that clinical research is all about reporting. So you have to report it, because if you don't report it, then you are saying that it did not occur. And if somebody inspects you and they found that it occurred and you covered it, it becomes a problem. Okay, let me know how I'm doing with time. Then minor, obviously we all know what minor is in terms of like, okay, it happened, it's been documented, it's not half as serious, or it does not impact data integrity, study integrity in any way. And also, like I explained earlier, that a visit window is missed if a patient is meant to be at site at a certain day and they miss it 2+2+3. Most of us that have reviewed protocols, I'm sure most of us have seen protocols before, and if you have not, maybe we'll look for an example and drop it on our community group chat. If you are not on the community group chat, please make sure you join us, because we drop a lot of information there. We have like our Tuesday meetings where we gather information together and discuss as well. So I mean, it's important basically that all information with regards to any deviation is reported, as it should be. Then minor documentation error, that's very, very common. Again, think about the fact that if we record every minor deviation, every minor documentation error, if it's reported, the reason why you report it is so that we have a trail. We can review it. I remember one of my studies, I asked my team to gather all minor I asked my team to gather all minor deviations and let us look at trends. So minor deviations, even though they say it's minor, it's an important trend identifier for us. It identifies sites that are prone to like errors, common human errors, and it also opens it up for us to understand whether they need additional training or not. So I will not discount the minor deviations. They are usually quite a high number of them. They don't really pay a lot of attention to them. But if you have too many minor deviations within your trial, then obviously, we start to look at trends and try to understand where we can, make it better. And then obviously the administrative one, where source documents are not filed correctly, non-essential forms, incomplete, data entry delay, internal communications delay, non-protocol system notes. I will pause here. Does anybody have any questions for me?
Thank you so much. Good evening, Ma. Good evening, buddy.
Good
Quite
evening.
very insightful so far. So, just looking at the classification of BDs, method deviations, I just look at it critically, both the major, the minor, and the administrative. So, I want to say, are we safe, or is it right if we can say that the ones that are classified as major has to do with the safety of the study subject or participant? Because we look at the items you've put there, it's strictly about the safety of the participant. So are we safe to say, is it safe that if we say, or if we just say it or conclude by saying that major ones are mainly about the safety of the study participant? Because the other ones are not, if you look at it in detail, the other ones, they're not about mostly about the safety, but I don't know if you're right, if you can say that, if you can conclude by saying that those ones are just about this.
Can you go back to the slide, please, so that everybody's aware? And I agree with you. Major, yes. But again, that means that you are, if you have not seen the protocol and assessed exactly because what could count as major, we cannot give a blanket description, right? So looking at wrong dose, incorrect treatment administered, yes, it has to do with the safety of the patient. I agree. Eligibility criteria not. You know that basically why do we conduct clinical trials? For two things, efficacy and safety. So it depends on the stage of the trial or the phase of the trial. If it's phase one, you are focused mainly on safety. So obviously everything that you identify that you say is major, 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 then obviously you are saying we are talking about the safety. But if you are looking at phase 3 studies that's talking about safety and talking about efficacy, what can impact the data integrity as per efficacy? What can impact the data integrity as per safety? If you combine these two together, we cannot just say it's about patients' safety alone. It can also impact efficacy. Does that make sense? Okay, good.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so
Very
much,
good.
ma'am. Thank you.
Very,
Thank
very
you.
good question, Didier. I like that. Any other question from any other person before we move on? Okay, let's move on quickly. I know they are watching my clock. Detection, documentation, and reporting. Again, clinical research. And the reason why we are having this conversation is because of our culture. I don't know how many Africans or how many Nigerians that we have here today. We don't like to document things. We don't like to report things. We don't like to file things. We don't want that hassle. If you can't do it, get an administrative staff. If you can't, get an administrative staff, but make sure it is being done. Because clinical research is about being able to file a record and be able to retrieve it effectively, easily, and quickly. Now, if you're not able to do that, then you have already failed within all your processes. So how the deviations are detected is, first of all, site can self-identify it. If a site commits a deviation, they will let you know. They will report themselves. They will let you know. They will let you know about it. And then, okay, thank you very much, yes, thank you. So, if sites can identify it once they've committed a deviation, they will notify the sponsor or notify the CRO, depends on whoever they are working with. The most common deviations that we've seen so far is the CRA and monitor review. right? Because when the CRAs go to sites, they go to, monitor the sites and all of that, they identify deviations, they report it, the sponsor assesses it, they categorize it, they report back to site if there's any action that is required, from them. Then data review and queries as well. A lot of, patient profile review, data review, medical data review will always generate deviations because, as I said from the start, you are working with human beings and you're working with processes. These two combined together, you always find errors in between, right? And that is why we conduct this monitoring. That's why monitoring is done so that we can identify these deviations and manage them effectively. For those of us that have looked at protocols at all, if you have ever read the protocol, there's always a disclaimer or there's always a line there that states that we do not allow deviations on this study. It is stated there so that nobody deviates. Once you deviate, then it is counted as something against the study. So there's always that line in there that deviations are not permitted on the study, So you can also detect deviations, as I said, from data review and queries. Audit and inspection is very, very, if you wait till you are inspected for a deviation, then that becomes like a major audit finding or an inspection finding, and then that requires a whole overhaul of your processes and all of that. So it's always good to make sure that, protocol deviations are being monitored on a regular basis. And then, of course, you have the subject reporting. So, and then we've outlined some, the documentation and reporting timelines. I will move forward quickly just so that I don't hold up the next speaker. Next slide, please. Okay, so as we said, there's a problem. If you keep having deviations, then there's a problem. And if the problems are persisting or the issues are persisting, how can you fix it? I said earlier that, if you have like a long list of minor deviations that is impacting like sites or whatever, it starts to show us a trend of issues, trend of maybe it's as a result of under-trained staff or staff that are not trained properly, that need additional training, things like that. So how do you identify, how do you understand deviations, why deviations happen, first of all, how do we understand them? And the best way to understand them is for you to make sure that, we put a preventative measure in place. And how can you put a preventative measure in place? You have to understand what is the root cause, what's the problem. We had a discussion at our Tuesday meetings, I think a couple of weeks ago, and then we were talking about, I think our discussion always brings us to the fact that we don't have data in Africa. We always end up there. And then the person that convenes the meeting was like, the next discussion will be like, why do we have issues with collecting data and being able to retrieve that data in a format that is usable in Africa? So that's a root cause problem already. So that's a root cause, and we're trying to identify that and understand that. So root cause analysis is all about that. And there are different methodologies that you can apply to root cause analysis. I remember the first time I heard about this method. I just started project management then, and somebody said, write a root cause analysis. And I was thinking they've asked me to do something completely out of the ordinary, that I needed to, get all my degrees together and shake myself up and go like, oh God, I said you should be able to do this. And I realized that it was simply asking me to say, why? Why did this happen? Until you get to the very last why, that there's no more whys. Seriously, why? So if you say you went to a site and they say you administered the wrong dose, the first question they will ask you is why? You'll be like, well, I used the wrong syringe and, used the wrong measure of vial. Why? Well, where they put the vial and the syringe is mixed with another clinical trial that uses, so ours use 200 ml, the other one uses 500 ml. Why? Well, we don't have enough storage to separate them. Why? Well, the clinical facility did not give us enough space and we did not have enough cupboards. Why? The why has to get to the point, and that's why it's called root cause. What is the root that we need to deal with? Because if we just dealt with the peripheral one where they said, oh, I forgot to write it, you have just covered everything and you have not dealt with the problem itself, because this is going to reoccur again. Well, is it a systematic problem? Is it a systemic problem? Is it a method problem? Is it a process problem? Is it a people problem? So that's what we've put all these methodologies in here. And there are others, for those of us that are the PhDs here, I'm sure you know about other methodologies, but we've just put this as examples here, to look at, as the 5 whys, you are iteratively asking to drill down to the fundamental cause, and understanding, how you can manage, very simple deviations quickly. There's the Ishikawa type of methodology as well, which gives you like a mapping, and I kind of mentioned that in what I was saying, which is 6 M's: man, machine, method, material, measurement. Is it mother nature? I don't know. uh, fault tree analysis, which is top-down deductive approach, traces, on how a specific outcome could result from multiple contributing factors, like the example I just used now. And then, PDCA cycle: plan, do, check, act, look, which is used to systematically investigate and test corrective measures. So we've just put a couple of corrective questions. Okay. I'm seeing a question from Sarif. He says, how do you handle SAE or protocol deviations that is not reported? It depends on who you are asking that question to. If I'm a sponsor and I identify that a site did not report an SAE, we have to understand why they did not do that, and that's what we just said. So we've just come right, we've come right into that. We've just slipped right into the right discussion, and it's about CAPA, the use of CAPAs. You understand, corrective and preventive actions. If we identify that a protocol deviation or a deviation was not reported, why was it not reported? And if it's a case of training at the site, then you will have to be able to put the CAPA in place and then, manage this effectively as a deviation. So we've put like the stages of the CAPA process there. First thing is that we identify the problem. The problem is that the SAE or the protocol deviation was not reported. And then second thing is we have to investigate the root cause. How do you investigate that? You ask questions. You interrogate the people that are involved in it. Because as I said from the start, you're looking at people and processes. So you interrogate people. You also look at the process. Are they aligned? Is streamlined? Are there any complexities there that's confusing people and not allowing people to understand? For instance, if an SAE is not reported, maybe the person was mistaken about the time of reporting. Maybe they were meant to report it after they've graded the SAE. They were meant to report it in 24 hours or within 5 business days. They did not report it, right? So it could be a confusion. It could be a misunderstanding of a process. You don't know. The only way for you to identify that is to investigate the root cause. The next thing is that you develop a plan. You develop a plan for, to be able to implement a solution. Once you've identified the root cause, you implement the plan, you verify effectiveness, and then you document and review. Review gives you like a continuous process improvement. You continue to improve that process. I come back again to where we are speaking from, and one of the reasons why we are having this webinar. I come back to that place of our African context, where we feel where we feel we've done it and that's it. You must continue in the process of improvement. It must be done regularly. That's why you have GCP trainings. Do it every 2 years. Make whether you know everything about GCP, whether you've been a clinical researcher for donkey years, 25 years, 100 years, every 2 years, every 3 years, most organizations are requiring that you present a new certification for your GCP knowledge, because knowledge can be redundant. Okay. All right. We've also put some information here in terms of the framework for CAPA, corrective action, preventive action, verification. You document it and then you put an escalation path in place. Okay. Next slide, please. Do we have any question in the chat? No? Okay. Prevention strategies, the best deviation is one that never happens. Yes, but prevention requires a systems level approach and not just training. So we prefer that a systems level approach, is implemented across all protocols as needed. With that situation, you have a seamless process that's in place. You'll be able to identify problems in a timely manner. You reduce a lot of manual efforts and reduce error by doing that. There's also timeliness that's involved in it, because if you put like a system level approach in place, you have a process that's already been implemented and tested for verification. So your timeliness, don't forget that everything about clinical research is about being quick, retrieval, reporting, all are controlled with time. So timeliness is really important. So things like protocol training program, this is usually required from the start of the study. Middle study as well is required. When you have a new staff member or new team member, is also required. So that cannot be overemphasized. Role specific training matrices per SOP, retraining triggered by any major deviation, competency assessment before patient contact. All of these are required. And also one of the things that's mandated with most of the protocols that I've seen today is that you provide things like checklists. so that as the site staff are working or as the CRAs they are working, there's a checklist there because our brain can house everything and systems can as well can break down or you can have issues with technology. So that's something that's also very useful. Protocol design and feasibility. I see a lot of complex processes that gives me headaches, and it's just you don't know what to do with the protocol. It is so complex. It's sites. It's gives it's what it puts so much burden on the site, puts so much burden on the patients, and with this type of protocols, it will be deviation ridden because people will not care anymore. You know, when we talk about sites, people think you're just talking about a small space. Sites are usually huge university hospitals with multiple departments, with multiple site staff. And then you find a small unit there called the clinical trial research unit, trying to find their way around protocols, dealing with like 20 or more big sponsors, dealing with like 100 clinical trials at a time. And then you assume that your protocol, if it's not engaging and if it's not simplified enough for them to be able to implement it effectively at site, you think you will not be protocol reading. You know, you see that like from a mile away that this is going to be a problematic protocol. Once they review it, they'll tell you. But thank goodness today you have a lot of advocacy, advocation for contribution to protocol development from either the patient safety groups, those who are suffering from the disease, the hospitals, KOLs, key opinion leaders, all sorts. So now that's helping to simplify the protocols. Yes, thank you very much, Rasha. Decentralized clinical trial can also prevent PD. Agreed. You identify the operational complexity early, which is what I just talked about. You build realistic visit windows and procedures, simplify complexity again with workflow diagrams. Workflow diagrams, always very good. And as I said, checklists. Check, check, check. Did we do this? Did we do this? Different sections of the protocol. It always helps. And then cheat sheets as well. High level summary. I know that we have the protocol synopsis, but if you have like a high level summary where people can like a quick reference guide for the sites, that will also assist in like preventing some of the deviations that are really not absolutely necessary. Proactive monitoring is something that we encourage every sponsor to do. Some people are cutting costs, but I always ask, why are you cutting costs at the end of the day when you've spent over 300 million on a clinical trial? What cost are you now beginning to cut? From the onset. From the onset, you should be able to assess what you require per resources and what will determine the outcomes that you're looking for in your trial. So proactive monitoring is really important. Risk-based monitoring, targeting high-risk sites, yes. But again, we talked about this this week's Tuesday, that hybrid situations should work in certain parts of the world, and that's because of some inherent problems that's there. Central statistical monitoring for data anomalies, and that should be like an ongoing process. Like some certain frequency can be set up, and this can be done more like spot checks from your programming team. Real-time ECRF alerts for critical protocol fields, edit checks, very, very helpful. Trigger-based for cost visits as well. So all of that, I always say, put a lot of edit checks in the systems so that it will give you more like a gateway to prevent any errors or bigger errors, so to speak. Electronic systems and alerts. We have the CTMS integrated visit window alerts. As it was said earlier, we have our United Clinical Trial Management System. We built that in place so that we can actively manage sites. We have a dashboard that feeds into from the different sites that we are working with, and that also helps us to manage the sites. We understand the high-risk sites. We see the sites that are prone to errors, and we trigger trainings for them. Automated eligibility criterion checking, deviation tracking dashboards to PMs and escalation flags for repeated site deviation. I've been messaged that my time is about up, so I'm just going to quickly rush through everything else. Site communication and support, I cannot overemphasize that. It's really important that we continue to communicate with the site, give a very open, pathway, escalation pathway, highly, highly important so that the sites know exactly what to do if they have experienced any deviation. And then trend analysis and learning is really important as well. Next slide, please. Okay, what good documentation looks like. I'm not going to belabor this. I'm sure most of us are professionals. And we will send this slide out as well, and then the recording as well will be sent out. But I want to talk about quickly subject ID and protocol version. It's really important. Severity classification is really, really important. Severity classification. Are you classifying these protocol deviations correctly, right? Because if they are not being classified correctly or categorized in the right category that they should be, then that's another set of problems entirely. So it's important. And then the other thing, yes, date of occurrence and discovery, highly important. Everything there is important. I just wanted to mention that quickly. And then risk manage metrics, and then of course key takeaways. Operational key takeaways. We should classify every deviation by severity before any other action is taken. As I mentioned, severity, highly important. Documentation must be contemporaneous. Never reconstruct records retrospectively because you will miss the key information that should be there. Once a deviation happens, it is important that it is documented immediately because you get the fresh facts, and that will also help to manage the root cause analysis afterwards. RCA quality determines CAPA quality. Superficial RCAs leads to ineffective prevention. So let's please take note of that. Subject safety always takes precedence over data completeness. Pay attention to that. That's the most important part. Trend analysis across sites and trials is more valuable than individual deviation management. Prevention through protocol design and training reduces operational burden downstream. And then we have the deviation tracking framework. Let's move on quickly. Prevention. Wow, how many slides do I have left? So prevention, building a system that works, quality by design, big, big, big. If you saw the last revision that was done by the ICH, big things. One of the big points that was mentioned there is that quality by design. And I said this earlier. Okay, my time's up. Sorry, guys. I'm going to have to respect the rules. My time is up so that other people can speak. But please ask me any question. Just look at the slides. I'm still online. If you have any questions, please drop it in the chat. We'll discuss about it later. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much for such an insightful session. Please, if you really enjoyed this session, I want you to go to the chat box. If you want to say yes, if you want to say yay, if you want to lift your hands, thumbs up, please go ahead to do that while we bring on board the second speaker. We have the second speaker here already. So I'll be taking the second speaker. Thank you very much for joining us, Noria Phillips, for that insightful session. So the second speaker is Dr. Shamsu Mohammed Iguda. He's a hematology senior resident and early career clinical researcher with a focus on sickle cell disease and stroke prevention in low resource setting. He has contributed to observational and interventional trials, supporting medical and safety review, protocol implementation, and data oversight. He is passionate about clinical trial safety, medical monitoring, and strengthening high-quality research across sub-Saharan Africa. And he's going to be taking us on the clinical oversight, medical monitoring, and protocol compliance. That is a huge view into protocol deviation. So please join me as we have Dr. Shamsu Mohammed Iguda. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you so much. Good day to you all.
Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you for the introduction. As she earlier introduced, my name is Shamsu Muhammad Iguda. I'm a physician and also a clinical researcher, and I work at intersection of clinical medicine and trial operation. So I have seen most of things related to protocol deviations have been discussed. I don't. Okay. So I want to open with the core message here in these slides because it sets the intellectual foundation for everything that follows. A protocol deviation, I say, is not a paperwork event, as stated. Let me explain why this distinction matters. In many of the sites I have worked with, deviation management is treated somehow as administrative task. But something the study coordinator usually handles, files away, and submits at the next monitoring visit. So when that happens, really a lot is being missing, and the value of deviation management. So every decision is actually telling you that things is telling you three things simultaneously. One, the first is it is safety signal. It is asking, was the participant harmed? So this is very important. Or were they put at risk? Even if the answer is no. So the near miss also matters. And the second you have to look at, it is a data quality signal. It is asking, does this event affect the validity of the data? Does this affect the validity of the data that we are collecting? Can we still use these participant results? And the third thing is it is a system performance signals, and it is asking why did this happen? What does this event reveal about how our site process work or do not work? So a lot has been said about protocol deviation earlier. So this diagram on the right of this slide shows that protocol deviations sit at the intersection of three critical domains. That is participant safety, data integrity, regulatory compliance. And none of these domains stands alone. So a missed visit window is not just a scheduling problem. And it's not all it's not a scheduling problem. So now look at the courts. No, go back to the previous slides. So look at the courts, yes. A deviation detected late is 10 times more painful than one reported immediately. So when you find a deviation early, you have an option. So you can mitigate it, document it clearly, and prevent it from happening again. So when you find it 3 months later at a monitoring visit, you now have an audit finding. And what does that mean? A sponsor query, a root cause analysis for you to reconstruct from memory. So you have to think about it. Then a CAPA to write under pressure, and potentially a data integrity question that could affect the entire study So we can move to the next slide. So I want to acknowledge something important before going further. I have read about your responses from your registration forms. So this slide is not, per se, generic content. It is built directly from what you told us you are struggling with. So let me walk you through each challenge because I want to know that this session was designed specifically around your pain point. So challenge one is documentation failure. This was the most frequently mentioned issue by far. So sites are not documenting deviation at all. There are certain situations that do happen. So all documenting them so poorly that they cannot even survive an audit query. So events discovered only when the CRA arrives, and by then the data are somehow confusing, dates do not align, and the deviation log is empty, and so many things like that. So challenge two is CAPA confusion. The press staff recurrent appeared in so many of our responses as an example. The third is challenge in classification ambiguity. So this is real operational problem. So when a deviation occurs, teams spend 10 or 20 minutes sometimes, or more than that, debating whether is it a minor, major, or critical, instead of them to act uh, promptly. So challenge four is delayed time, real-time decision. So when something goes wrong, some teams, they do freeze. They are not sure what to do, or who to call, what to document, or how to even escalate the problem. So the next one is challenge five, that is early identification failures. So many deviations that should have been caught and managed at site levels are sometimes discovered by the CRA at a monitoring visit, sometimes months after they have even occurred. So the last one, this is what most of the participants. So I also want to acknowledge what you have said, and you want again. Okay, move to next slides. So I think we can skip these slides. It has been ironed out the definition of protocol deviation, why deviation happens. You have also talked about it. So you can go to the next slides. Okay. This slide has also been discussed. We can move to real case scenarios. Yes. Okay. So now let us look at some examples. So I'm going to walk through 3 case studies in this section, each one representing a different category of deviation that is common, especially in our setting here in Nigeria and low middle income settings. So case one, there's a participant in a cardiovascular trial is enrolled at a site in Lagos, and they need to travel from Lagos to Kano. They need to travel, I mean, from Kano, where they were visiting family, back to Lagos for a scheduled visit. So during that journey is maybe a sudden interstate transport strike and maybe strike long distant buses, and maybe fuel scarcity compounds the problem. And the participant arrive at the clinic like let's say 5 days outside the allowed visit window. So, but in real sense, there is no clinical emergency and no safety event, but the window is clearly missed. So that's one of the important points I want us to understand. So no safety concern with this particular participant. So let me walk also through 4 responses steps. One is because this is exactly the scenario where teams either handle things transparently and professionally, because a lot of times when people hear about protocol deviation, they do get anxious and they try to hide something. And protocol deviation management requires transparency. So step one is clinically screen first. You have to look at the participant. The moment this participant walked through the question is not how bad is this deviation. You are not looking at the deviation at that particular point then. So the question is, how is this person? Is the you have to that means you have to complete clinical assessment. You have to rule out any medical consequences, and then this is both good in medicine and also regulatory practice. So step two is you have to capture the context. You are now going to document in your source notes the following objective facts. So the date the participant was due, the date they actually arrived, the reason for the delay, specifically the transport strike, as I stated, and your clinical findings at the late visit. So this has to be captured. So you do not need to justify the situation emotionally. You need to record facts that a regulator can read clearly on and also understand. So the next step, step 3, is classify correctly. Given what we have just described, there is no safety issue here, no primary endpoints are affected. So this should be classified as a minor deviation. Maybe those that are with us, you have seen how the classification as either minor, major, or critical is being done. So, but you have to apply your judgment. If this participant's late visit means a primary efficacy assessment was outside analysis window, so that changes the late classification. So you now move to the next step. That's step 4, prevent recurrence. So you have to prevent recurrence, and Mrs. Nuria has explained in detail how you can prevent recurrences in some instances. So if you have to add a practical operational step, a midpoint check, maybe you have to be calling the participant to remind them about their follow-ups and things they can get ready before their schedules appointment. So the key lesson here is that auditors do respect transparency than fearful silence. So a well-documented, honestly explained late visit is a mark of a competent site, but a blank deviation log with a missing visit window is it can be a serious audit finding. So the next slide. So we are going to look at case 2, where the scenario involves consent, use of informed consent form. So the scenario version 2 of the informed consent form has been approved by the Health Research Ethics Committee. So the study coordinator received the approval notification by email. However, in day-to-day, pressure of running the site, she or he did not print or distribute the version 2.0 of the protocol. So three new participants were enrolled and consented using version 1. That is the old version instead of version 2.0. So now here is where the deviation can either be managed professionally or it can turn into much more serious problems. And let me start with the wrong column, the one colored in red. So the most dangerous response is to try to cover up or backdating the version 2 signatures. It's not administrative workaround. It is scientific misconduct, really. So if this were ever discovered during an inspection, so it will not result in a protocol deviation finding. So it will result in a data integrity investigation. Now, let us look at the correct column. That is the one colored in green. So now the first action is to stop enrollment. So you have already enrolled 10 participants with the wrong version. Now you have to stop the enrollment and do not add a fourth, fifth, or sixth participant. So you have to cease the enrollment. So the next action is for you to notify the PI. You have to tell the PI right away, not at the maybe next meeting also. At that particular day, you have to tell the PI. Then you have to escalate it to Health Research Ethics Committee and the sponsor within the mandatory time frame, usually 24 to 48 hours when it involves consent forms. So the three affected participants now must be, you have to call them back. You have to consent using version 2.0 now. So this consent must be documented. It has to be documented carefully, including the dates, who conducted it, what was explained, and that the participant agreed to continue. Then you fix the system. And then you should purge all the version 1.0 from the site so that such things should not appear again. So the sentence at the bottom of this slide is also important. So a hidden consent error is worse than original mistake. So the original error was a process failure. So the cover up in an ethical failure. So in the context of clinical trials, informed consent is not a form. It is a fundamental right. When you protect, it is a fundamental right. Yes, that's obvious. So we can move to the next slide. So let us look at the final case scenario. Here in this scenario, in a weekday morning, let's say so in a weekday morning, the national power grid fails, which in Nigeria is not something exceptional. So we do encounter such situation. So the site backup generator has been scheduled for a service. So and on this particular morning, it does not start. So over the next 4 hours, before power is restored, the investigational product, maybe certain drug temperature rises from its required maximum level, maybe of, if the limit has been set to maybe 8 to 11 degrees Celsius. So at the same time, a batch of specimen that needed to be processed within a 4-hour window is now delayed because the centrifuge and freezer are also affected. These are things that can happen in our setting, low middle income settings. So it's not something new. So step one is you have to have a trigger detection. And please, if you have question, you can ask me while I'm speaking. So this either comes from a temperature alarm if your maybe equipment has one, or from a manual temperature. So some fridges comes with an automated detector. Okay, think someone has question, or we can take questions.
Yes.
Patients.
Okay, sorry to cut you, please. Sorry to interrupt, please. Sorry. I
Okay.
don't want to lose my thoughts. That's why I had to. So for the last slide, the case study that has to do with updated CRF, the last slide, where
Okay,
a CRF
informed consent.
exactly from 1.0 to 2.0. So I don't know if you so I saw part of the things you asked that we should do correctly. So you asked that the participant should be consented with the new version 2.0. Now, this is
Yes.
talking about the CRF, that's the case report form, as in for the documents, the source document. No. So I'm asking now, my emphasis, my thought is going to the EDC, that's the electronic data capture system. So depending on the protocol, for example, I don't know if it will be right or if you suggest that if this participant was also reconsented with the new version of the CRF or the source document or whatever it is. I don't know if it's okay for us to also, or if it's a good practice, if that way, to also reconsent this participant on the EDC if it's available. I don't know if you understand my question. Thank you.
Yeah, I understand what you are saying. There is something we call source document. So if you have to make a correction in maybe your source document, sometimes we use a paperwork. Maybe a paperwork, we have to do it manually. So it has to be a replica of what you will do in the EDC system. So if you take if you consent the participant in the EDC system and you have not captured it in the source document, so that's halfway done work. So it's ideally has to be both on the EDC system and the paperwork. So I don't know if I have answered your question.
Yes,
Thank you.
yes. Thank you so much, sir. So one thing is that I think on the EDC too, I think we need to also capture the because it comes with this it's constant form. It comes with the deviation. So I think the deviation bit also should be updated. I just think so. As in, I don't know.
Yeah, so
That's what I.
Edidiego, I can jump in here quickly. So you're both right in terms of like what needs to be done because Dr. Shamsu's, informed consent forms, they are usually in paper. Then electronic is not very popular because again, the authorities have not given like a full approval for e consents. Some countries use it, some don't. But till today, paper is still the only accepted format where you get like a wet signature of that patient there, and that confirms that the patient has consented. And then to Dr. Shamsu's point, when the CRA or the monitor comes to the site, they expect that the site would have entered this data into the EDC system. Now, to what you said, the place where the site should have entered that information is the version of that ICF aligning with the version of the protocol. Now, where the deviation would occur is if they put that reconsent as against a different protocol version, that becomes a problem. Okay. And it's usually just a finding. A query is raised, the CRA will raise the query, they'll get that, corrected. And then once that is corrected, the CRA comes to site, they perform a source document verification, they confirm that it's there, all done. So I just wanted to say both your conversations is same, you were just mirroring different situations. Thank you.
Thank you, man. Thank you so much, man. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Okay. So this slides five critical questions in real time. It gives us a mental decision-making framework that you can use in real time. Every time something goes wrong at your own local site. So the five questions are sequenced deliberately from 1 to 5. So question 1 is the participant safe? So if you look at most of what I have been mentioning, the first thing I mentioned is the participant safety. So it is very critical and important. So if there is any critical risk, if the participant may have received maybe a compromised dose or missed a visit, follow-up, or experience an adverse event. So that is a medical situation that required an immediate clinical response. So a regulatory compliance is also important, but you cannot document your way around a safety failure, actually. So question 2 is the protocol already breached, or is there still time to prevent it? So this question distinguishes between a deviation that has already occurred and a near miss that you can still intercept and harm. So if a participant is scheduled for a visit that will fall outside the window tomorrow and you realize it today, so you may still be able to maybe reschedule the participant. And if the visit window has already closed, So you are now in documentation and classification mode rather than prevention mode. So the next question for you to ask is this isolated or part of a pattern? So this is the question that most sites do skip, and it is one of the important question that needs to be asked. So a single missed visit windows may be one of event triggered by so many circumstances and events. But if this event is the third missed visit window, maybe in the past 6 weeks, that is not a series of isolated events. So it might be likely a systemic workflow problem. So recognizing the pattern early prevents small misses from accumulating into a major quality findings. So the question 4 is who must know immediately? Who are you going to report or to escalate to? So the answer depends entirely on what you determine in question 1, and that is the safety. So a minor isolated event with no safety impact needs to be communicated to the PI. So, and it has to be documented in your local log. So a major deviation, while in a major deviation affecting safety or primary data, that must be escalated to the sponsor's CRE within the agreed time frame, which is usually 24 to 48 hours. So the next question for you to ask is what must be documented today? So, documentation degrades rapidly over time. So details that are crystal clear on that very day of the events can become heavy within 48 hours, and nearly you cannot even recover it maybe after maybe like 2 to 3 weeks. So the same day notes, even if it is a brief, even if it is handwritten and will be transferred to the EDC system data, is your most reliable protection. So it is important for you to know these things. So next, so this is documentation using not to file. This has also been discussed earlier, so we can skip it. Same thing with these slides. CAPA has been well explained, and I know a lot of us now can write CAPA without any headache. So let me discuss this slide. It is important. So this slide addresses something that does not appear in many of the regulatory guidelines, but is responsible for more avoidable findings than almost any technical failure. So the fear culture in clinical research settings. So let me describe what a fear-driving site looks like from the inside. So when a team member notices something is wrong, so maybe a missed assessment, is consent discrepancy, or a dose that has been administered outside the protocol window. So their first question is not, how do I fix this thing? So their first question is, will I get in trouble if any of the team member or the PI knows? So if the answer to that question has historically been yes, so um if if staff have witnessed maybe a colleague that has been harassed because of similar situations, so then the rational individual response is maybe for him to say nothing and just to fill in the blank. So the document to document as if nothing has not, as if something has not happened, and his hope will be the CRA will never notice this. So this describes how the fear culture works. So let me describe the other aspect, what a fear driving side. Oh, okay. So the high performance side, how does it looks like? So if you look at the other column colored in green, so what is possible when deviation reporting is safe? So issues are discussed openly in teams huddles. So not because the team is perfect, but because they have agreed that early identification is more valuable than the appearance of perfection. So small problems are corrected before they grow. Oh, my time is off. So let me quickly run off. So the question that many managers ask at this point is, how do I create a culture like this that's the high performance? So the honest answer to this is that it starts from the bottom, from the top. So if a PI responds to a reported deviation with a curiously and maybe a problem solving uh, mind instead of blame. So the team will learn that reporting is safe. They will be reporting certain deviation, unlike the fear driving side. So we can move to the next slides. So we can skip this thing also. It's part of the preventive strategy. Go to the last slides for the take home message. So here we have a before we maybe uh, we have 5 takeaway here. Takeaway one is deviation, they are manageable. So when they are recognized early and reported without fear, so the operational implication of this is that your sites need a reporting culture. So takeaway two is impact on participant safety and data integrity drives urgency, escalation, and CAPA depth. So this is the classification principle that has been condensed to a single sentence here. So, if takeaway thingy, that's documentation must be factual. So you should not falsify information and so on. So but it must be factual, timely, and traceable. So you have to write to the audit standard every time. So not just when you think someone is watching. So you should make it a habit. So takeaway four, CAPA must change the system, not the individuals, and not just the wording of you have to train a staff. So that's for takeaway four. Takeaway five, the strongest sites, they are not perfect. They are responsive. Those that are responsive, transparent, and disciplined, they are the strongest sites. So just to conclude, I want to thank every one of you for being part of this session today. Bye bye. I'm open to hear your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Iguda. That was very insightful. We have some questions we'll be taking after the whole webinar this evening. But before we go into the question and answer session, we have one more experienced professional that will be bringing on board to take us on the site monitoring quality control or data quality and deviation management. She is Blessing Oboro. Permit me if that is not the right pronunciation, though. Blessing Oboro is a clinical research professional with a background in pharmacology, therapeutics, and toxicology, focused on contributing to the transformation of the clinical trials landscape in Africa. She has experience working with research organizations, including 54 Gene, Merit CRO, and Akivia, with hands-on involvement in site monitoring, data quality, and regulatory compliance across clinical studies. She is currently pursuing a master's degree in drug discovery and development, aligned with our goal of advancing more inclusive, efficient, and innovative healthcare solutions across Africa. Join me as we have Blessing Oboro. Thank you very much for joining us. Please
Hi,
go ahead.
thanks for having me. Good evening.
Good evening.
Please, can you confirm that I am audible?
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, thank you very much for having me,
Thank you.
everybody. So, I don't need to introduce myself again. My name is Blessing Okoro, and I work as a clinical research associate. So, I will be continuing the conversation on managing protocol deviations in clinical trials, and I will be talking from the regulatory aspects, inspections, audits. We've spoken a lot about root causes, so we'll just go on to talking about other things, what the auditors look out for, what common documentation gaps we have in managing protocol deviations. So yes, I just thought that we cannot go ahead with all of that without properly defining what a protocol deviation is. But it might seem like we might have to skip this now because I think we already have basic knowledge on what protocol deviation is. So we know that protocol deviation is any non-compliance to the protocol. I would usually tell my sites that your protocol is your Bible. just as you have to keep to the holy book, you have to keep to what the protocol says. So any non-compliance to what the protocol implies, what GCP, many of us probably already have GCP certification. You already took the GCP training. So the GCP guidelines or procedures, and yes, any event that can impact participant safety, their rights, or even data integrity in the long run can be considered a protocol deviation. And I would also like for us to have it at the back of our minds that we cannot say that the metrics for a high performing study is dependent on whether a protocol deviation exists or not, because I think that would just be very performative. And like Muhammad said, I hope that's his name, I'm sorry, that would just, imbibe the fear culture, the need to want to cover every single thing that happens. You are not properly documenting, or the fear of being queried, the fear of nobody wants to lose their job, the fear of wanting to lose your job. So yes, a high performing study team cannot be determined by, how many protocol deviations they have, or whether they have protocol deviations or not, but rather it is determined, based on whether these protocol deviations are identified, if they are properly escalated, and if in the long run they are prevented from recurring. So having a protocol deviation, they are humans, is sometimes not evitable, but yeah, you have to make sure that they are properly documented. So yes, that brings us to the common challenges in handling protocol deviations. Like I said, poor or delayed documentation, CAPA implementation difficulties, deviation classification and severity rating, real-time decision making, early detection before escalation. So yes, poor or delayed documentation. Sometimes protocol deviations are documented incompletely, and I think I would highlight one major protocol deviation that's, maybe major is not the word, sorry, but yeah, one protocol deviation that we've used as a case study all through this webinar, which is out of window visits. So in saying that the protocol deviation is not because these are the things that auditors would want to look out for. In saying that the protocol deviation is not documented completely, you might just document a protocol deviation occurred, but you're not documenting at what week the protocol deviation occurred. Is it at week 32? How many days of is it? Because in the protocol, you have your schedule of assessments. There's a window, say 36 weeks plus or minus 3 days. There's probably a grace period of 3 days. So before you can say that a protocol deviation has occurred, it has already gone outside that window. So you want to document how many days out of window it occurred and at what week it occurred. And if the information is available, why it occurred. Please, the next slide. Okay, and here we have common real life examples of protocol deviations. I don't know how many of us have, I think for the early career professionals, I don't know how many of us have hands-on experience. So you might just be hearing the word protocol deviation, but you probably don't know in practical terms what a protocol deviation is or examples of protocol deviations. Like I mentioned earlier, missed visit windows or out of window visits, enrollment of ineligible participants. I think the first speaker made mention of this. So from the protocol, you usually see your inclusion and exclusion criteria. The inclusion criteria encompasses everything that the participants must meet for them to be enrolled in the study, while the exclusion criteria encompasses all that the participants should not have for them to be enrolled in the study. So other examples of deviations are late SAEs, SU, SAR reporting. SAEs, they have to be reported. I'm sure you would have seen from your GCP training. You are not reporting your SAE next tomorrow in 24 hours. They have to be reported immediately because they are life-threatening. So your SAEs have to be reported immediately they are identified. So yes, incorrect IMP administration of wrong dose, missing informed consent signature. Informed consent is like the beginning of the study for each and every participant. They have to sign consent before they get into the study. So you want to be sure that no participants' consent or signature is missing, because if you get it wrong from the beginning, what's the probability that you will get things right going forward? So they have to sign incomplete source documentation, because in the long run, the CRA will be performing what we call source data verification, comparing what we have in the source data to the EDC. So you want to make sure that everything in the source data is complete and it tallies with what you already have in the EDC to be sure. The next slide. Okay, thank you. So yeah, we move on to the root causes, why these issues keep happening. If I'm talking about deviation, it would signal to you that something is going wrong. And every result-oriented person or proactive thinking person would want to think, oh, what can I do to rectify this thing that is going wrong? So there is no point preferring a solution if you do not understand what the problem is. The same way, there is no point implementing corrective preventive actions, CAPA, if you do not understand what the root cause is. So why do these issues keep happening? Because if you do not address the issue, then you would see them reoccurring. So it could be as a result of inadequate staff training or protocol understanding. In clinical trials, the site staff are usually trained during the SIV, the site initiation visit. And you know how we can want to do things. Let me just check it off my list that the site staff has been trained without wanting to know if they properly understand the requirements, if they properly understand everything that is supposed to be done in the study. So you're not conducting staff training as something to check off your list. You want to know that they properly understand it, give room for them to ask questions for the things they do not understand. If not, you are just setting yourself up for accumulating PDs, avoidable PDs in this case. High workload and operational pressure. This could be both on the side of the CRA and on the side of the sites. So you could see some CRAs handling say 40 studies, handling 50 sites, and obviously this is a lot of things going on at the same time. So it is very possible for them to encounter some sort of oversight, or even the sites themselves, just one person having to attend to hundreds of patients. It is very important to have adequately delegated people to this study to reduce the workload and prevent these PDs from happening. Like I mentioned before, the fear culture and delayed reporting. You see that something has happened, but for the fear of being queried, we want to cover it, you want to hide it instead of documenting it. Then that's a problem. Poor communication across stakeholders, weak monitoring or oversight processes, unclear escalation pathways, reactive rather than preventive quality management. Why give room for reaction when you can prevent it in the very first place? So yes, these are the root causes, and these are why you see many PDs keep happening. And then we move on to the common gaps in documentation or reporting. Like I mentioned before, incomplete deviation descriptions. You have out of window visits, or say when you're performing IP accountability. IP accountability is when you are taking account of the IPs that were dispensed. So you see that say 3 tablets are missing and cannot be accounted for, and then you just document it, 3 tablets missing. You have to document everything that pertains to that particular PD, the subject it is for, what might have cost it, why, if you can reach the, I've handled studies where you talk to the participants and then they'll tell you, oh, I spilled 2 tablets to the floor and I couldn't, no matter how cliche the reason might sound, you just have to document it. Documentation is your friend in reporting PDs. Vague or weak CAPA plans, delayed reporting timelines. Immediately you take note of any deviation, you have to report it. Inconsistent source documentation. So you have something written, like let's say looking through the lens of a CRA, you review the EDC while you are not on site because the EDC is probably what you have access to. You can't take the source documents home. So you review the EDC while on site and you see certain things, and then you go back to the site to perform source data verification and you are seeing something different in the source data, then it needs to be reconciled. So yes, it's just a case of one thing has to be correct and another thing has to be incorrect. So you have to trace that back. Lack of follow-up or closure evidence, poor communication between sites, CRO, and sponsor. Another thing I think gets really overlooked in managing protocol deviations is communication with the sites. So especially as a clinical research associate or as a site monitor, you are not relating with the site like, oh, I'm just a watchdog over you. Like I mentioned before, it imbibes that fear culture. So you want to make them understand that we are on the same team. We are working towards a common goal. Our priority for this study is, the patient's safety, and we want to ensure that at the end of the study we have data that we can work with. Because it gets to a point where you just start seeing inconsistent data, and at the end of the day you're wondering, what do we really do with this data? Because if you put it together, it just might not make any sense. So you want to make the site understand that we are on the same team, we are working together, and I am not a lord over you in that sense. So yeah, you want to communicate properly. The next slide, please. Okay, what auditors and inspectors focus on? They would usually look for delayed or undocumented protocol deviations, because your auditors are doing a thorough job checking through and through from the start of the study up until the end. So they would want to look out for undocumented protocol deviations, missing or incomplete CAPA documentation, repeated deviations showing ineffective preventive actions. So, like I mentioned before, when you do not solve the issue once and for all, or I think in this case, I would just give like an anonymous real life scenario. So, I once worked with a site where I had to handle the closeout visits. Another CRA had handled the monitoring visits up until the site halted, and then we had to perform a closeout. So at the time when I was performing the closeout visits, I had to review from the beginning the informed consent forms, and then I saw that there were some consent forms that were not signed. That's a red flag. That's a major pity. So I was thinking in my mind, why would a monitor have missed this? And it just makes sense that if the monitor had pointed it out from the start, the very first signature that was missed, the site would have taken note of it. And even for the monitor at the time, it would be something he or she would want to look out for. It would be something he or she would want to have their eye on, just to prevent it from being repeated. So anytime you're looking at the consent forms, you're going straight to the signature page. Was this signed? Because it is an error that has occurred before, and you don't want yourself replicating that protocol deviation. So yes, they would look for repeated deviations. So once you can, many times when you can implement a very strong CAPA from the onset, from the very first occurrence, then it prevents repetition. Participant safety risk and informed consent issues. You want to make participant safety is priority, and even when they are signing informed consent, you want to make sure they are aware of everything that even if there are any risk involved in the study, you want to make sure they are fully aware, and then they are not going blindly into the study. So this is why signature on that's an implication, that's you implying that they consented regardless. They read all of these things and they consented. Data integrity concerns and inconsistencies, evidence of late escalation or poor oversight. I think it's easy to tell when there isn't adequate oversight on a study. It's quite easy to tell. Protocol deviations is one of such red flags. You just see deviations flying around. Trends suggesting systemic process failures. So, because of our time, the next slide, please. Okay, so I put this together just to give us some perspective on CAPA. If we don't know what CAPA is corrective action and preventive action. So corrective action in protocol deviation is you fixing the current issue. It is established that there is already an issue and you are trying to fix the issue. And then preventive action, the issue might have occurred and you are trying to prevent reoccurrence. You are trying to stop it from happening again. I also put here that strong CAPAs address root causes. They go straight and then they address. That's why you also need to perform root cause analysis, because how do you come up with CAPA when you don't know what the root cause is? So strong CAPAs address root cause analysis and root causes, sorry, and weak CAPAs only treat symptoms. It might just treat what might have come out of that, and in the long run, something else will repeat itself. Maybe not the exact same issue, but another issue in disguising itself in that sense. So yes, weak CAPAs only treat symptoms. And then the next slide, this is also like a list of the protocol deviation management framework. First, you have to detect early, assess risk and impacts, classify severity. We've spoken a lot about major and minor protocol deviations. You want to classify the deviation. Document clearly, like I mentioned before, you document clearly and completely. Every single detail you have concerning that protocol deviation has to be on the books. Escalate appropriately. SAEs especially, they are life threatening, so you want to call the attention of anybody that you should call: the medical monitor, the PI, even the sponsors if they have to be aware, the IRBs as well, inform them, implement CAPA, and then track effectiveness. The next slide, please. So I think this should be my last slide. It has the key takeaways. Early identification prevents escalation. I think this is self-explanatory. Once you identify it early enough, it prevents it from progressing. Good documentation protects everyone. I think this one cancels out the fear culture. When you are very confident that you have everything on paper, you have everything properly documented, I think it protects everybody. You are not scared of being queried, and even when you are queried, you're like, yes, it happened, but it was documented. And obviously, effective CAPA, focusing on root causes. Communication matters, like I mentioned before. In handling protocol deviations, you're not trying to cast blame on anybody. You're not trying to make anybody stand on their toes because you found a PD. Your tone also matters in handling these things. Protocol deviations should drive improvement. Yes, I think this is my final takeaway. It should drive improvement. It should drive improvement. In the long run, you want to see that the study build something good. You want to see that you have good enough data. You want to see that the rights and safety of the participants was prioritized throughout the study. And yeah, I think that brings us to the end of my session. Thank you guys. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Bless.
Oh,
Okay.
sorry, I did not borrow.
Okay, Blessing Oboro. Thank you so much. I heard that you have a very important appointment. I don't know if you could spare us like 2 minutes to answer these two questions that are specifically for you.
Okay.
Okay, so the first question is, how should quality oversight adapt when operational realities at site don't fully align with protocol expectations? Did you
Mm.
get that, or you'd like me to come again?
Okay, I think I can see the chat box, so I'll just
Oh,
read
okay,
it.
that's fine.
Okay,
Yes.
so how should quality oversight adapt when operational realities at site don't, I'm sorry, something's coming here. Don't fully what? Okay, don't fully align with protocol expectations.
Expectations.
So I'm not sure how it should get to this point because for sites that I have worked with, I know that before every site gets full on, you would have to conduct site feasibility to ensure that they have everything necessary put in place. So in this case, maybe something might have gone wrong, something unexpected. Then you just always have to document it, like I said, and escalate it to say the sponsor or anybody appropriate. But yes, before it even gets to this point, the feasibility should have already been conducted to ensure or even to prevent any of this.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And the second question is, what are the most frequent inspection findings regulators identify in Nigeria clinical trial sites?
Mm. So I'll just talk from experience. I think the most common for the sites I've worked with are usually out of window visits, and you'd find the participants giving excuses like, "Oh, I stay very far away," and maybe the incentives they are giving them for the study too is not as much, or they've squandered it. So they'll tell you I stay very far away, so I couldn't come all the way, and you just keep piling up deviations like that. And some of them as well could be issues with IPs not properly administered, and many of those are common with studies where, say, you have to give. I've worked on a study where the IP was like 30 in a pack, 30 tablets in a pack. So at each visit there's like a monthly visit for each participant. At each visit, they come in, they take their IPs, like they take it home, and then they are supposed to take it by themselves one daily. So it should last them for the entire month. You can't force them to do what they don't want to do at home. So they can come back, and then in IP accountability, they're supposed to come back with the pack. So sometimes you're seeing patients come back with, say, 15 tablets. And you're like, we don't have 15 days in a month. What happens to the remaining 15 tablets? So, yes, I think deviations like that or findings like that are very, very, very common with things I have worked with. I'm only speaking from what I have experienced. So,
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so, so, so much. Please put your favorite emoji in the chat box for Blessing. She has given us a huge insight. Thank you so much. We really appreciate you joining us despite your very tight schedule. So thank
thank
you
you.
so much. I believe we can say you're free to go now, please. Thank you
Thank
so,
you.
so
Thank you.
much. Yeah,
Enjoyed
we
the
look
rest.
forward to seeing you again.
All right. Thank
Thank
you.
you very much, Blessing.
Bye.
Thank
Thank you for
you.
your time. Very insightful, and
Thank
appreciate
you.
the presentation. It was really good.
Mm.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Yes, so we have many more questions that will be directed to Isaiah as well as Dr. Shamsu. So I'll go with the first question. The first question is, how do you handle pressure from investigators who want to enroll participants that do not fully meet eligibility criteria? How do you
Mhm.
handle that pressure?
Dr. Iguda, do you want to help us here? You're on mute, sir.
Dr. Good, are you there?
Okay, yes, I'm here. I was
Okay.
speaking. Oh, not
Oh,
to me, I
okay.
was muted. Yes. Okay, thank you
Okay.
so much for this important question.
Thank
Um,
you.
to answer this question, there is three principles I want everyone to understand regarding a study. So, the first principle is data safety, patient participant safety, protocol compliance, and also data integrity. So you have to take all this into consideration. So pressure from the PI does not mean you should violate your protocol. Because if you violate your protocol, indirectly you are violating participant safety, and also you are affecting your data integrity. So what does that mean? So if your data integrity is being questioned, so a lot of people cannot trust you, and they cannot bring a study to you further if they have no trust in you. And another thing, participant safety is always the topmost important things you should consider. So let me give a typical case now, typical example. Maybe if you are enrolling, you have your eligibility criteria. Maybe a part of the eligibility criteria is for you to enroll only maybe sickle cell patients that are HBSS in a certain study. Maybe you are trying to test their cognitive function, and then you decide because of pressure from your PI, you decide to enroll AS or maybe SC. Meanwhile, their cognitive performance has not been established. So if you try to enroll such participants into your study, they will dilute your data. Meanwhile, if you are suspecting those group of people, they have cognitive impairment, and then you enroll those that have AS genotype, are likely they have high cognitive performance. So definitely they will affect your data. So it can affect your data, and your protocol is your blueprint, as DHK has just as stated earlier. So it's your blueprint. You should always comply to your protocol. Thank you.
But just a comment from me. Just for me, I'm going to be very stringent. If you have a repeated offender in terms of like a PI that's continuously enrolling participants that do not fully meet the eligibility criteria, you have the right to report the site and request that the site be shut down. Because as said, if patients' safety is, as we said, patient safety is paramount, data integrity is paramount, compliance to the protocol is paramount. Now, if data integrity is messed up, then you have just wasted resources, you've wasted the costs. As we said, clinical trials, very, very expensive to set up. So sponsors frown very, very much on PIs that, persist in enrolling patients that do not meet the criteria. So, and that's why you have the feasibility studies that are conducted at the start of the study to make sure that the PIs, they align with the goal. They sign, you have the investigator brochure, it's signed, you have the protocol, it is signed. As far as you have signed, you are liable and you are committed to requirements of the protocol. So if you start to operate outside of this, you are usually warned, you are usually advised, and then your site is closed down. So I just wanted to put that there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for the answer to that question. We still have about 4 other questions. The next one is, what happens when the protocol says one thing, but patient safety requires a different action immediately? So I would like, please go on.
I would like Dr. Shamsu to speak to that, please. What happens when the protocol says one thing, but patient safety requires a different action immediately? So obviously you are taking like a medical informed decision, so to speak. I'd like you to please speak to that. Thank you.
Okay, please come again when the protocol says something.
Yeah, so
And
for instance, the protocol, and I think this has to do with more like the clinical aspect of the study, more outside of the operational aspect. Maybe, for instance, for some patients that are going through oncological treatments, looking at the type of treatments that they may have received before they come into the trial, there are different categories and all of that. So medically, the protocol is requesting that a controlled amount of patients fitting this medical requirement or description falls within this category, but a patient safety requires a different action. Do you have any examples that you can maybe speak to? That means you are deliberately deviating, from the protocol and for a just cause as well. I think that's what the person is trying to ask.
So if the protocol has stated or has a clear guideline on what you will be doing and what if I understand protocols stated this are the certain procedure or these are the guidelines you will follow for certain procedure and what is being performed at the site is different. Is that what the questions?
Yeah, but they are
So okay,
aligned. They are adding that the patient safety requires a different action immediately. So how do
okay,
you
if
manage that?
if if that's actually patient safety is required. So, for example, a protocol has stated that if certain medications or you enroll participants and the level of hemoglobin level, let's say the PCB that is required for participant to continue in a study. And while that is what has been stated in the protocol, but during the course of the study, you discover that participant
Unfortunately, your
maybe
network is a bit
his
bad.
hemoglobin level has dropped down, maybe
Uh,
if maybe to six, let's say six, and if it has dropped less than six is eight. You hear me now? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you now. We can.
Okay, okay. So what I was saying is that if maybe during the course of the study and you discover the participant hemoglobin level maybe has dropped to less than six, so that drop in hemoglobin might tilt the participant into a serious safety concern, and the medication can compound such problems. So in such situations, adjust the dose of the medication. But meanwhile, if you just adjust the dose, or you withhold withhold the medication, you have to also document and you have to report it to the sponsor so that
Mhm.
they know what you have done. So in such
Absolutely.
situation, maybe a protocol amendment can be implemented so that in
Absolutely.
subsequent participant that has encountered such problems
Mhm.
can be an SOP for
Absolutely. I agree with you. And particularly if you have like a, 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 a cohort that stands out quite clearly following that type of medical situation. So whoever asks these questions, this usually will require the clinician judgment. And for them to make that judgment, they need to consult the medical monitor for the study. And that was why I asked Dr. Shamsu to maybe assist us in answering that. So most times they would have to, discuss this. This is more like a patient profile discussion or, reaction with the patient. And this usually occurs mostly with patients that are already on the study, not in the screening stage, not the eligibility or selection stage, because anything that is outside of the eligibility or and the inclusion and exclusion requirements for the study is not going to be allowed. But in a case where a patient is already on the study, and then you find that the patient is experiencing some certain unexpected situation, you have, expected SAEs that are documented, and then you have the suspected, unexpected, ones, adverse events, and then you have the ones that, may come up at all. It's a scientific study. The scientists are usually looking out for any anomalies or anything that's an outlier in what they're expecting. So in such a situation, it's documented. And as Dr. Iguda said, it may require, if it is valid, then it may require a protocol amendment that, this is impacting the study and it is valid. So anything of such can happen.
okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. We have three more questions to go. In your experience, what makes CAPA plan actually effective? In your experience, what makes a CAPA plan actually effective? We have about a
I
minute
think
to answer the question.
I think the last speaker said it. A CAPA plan that's effective must be easily understood and well streamlined.
Yes.
Making you're trying to solve a problem and then you create another complexity with it. Nobody will understand it, that problem will never be solved. Simplify it. What happened? Identify the problem, what type of solution is required. And as Dr. Iguda mentioned, he said it's not just a case of retraining, because at times retraining, these CRAs, you go, you conduct the SDV, you be like, okay, we identified a deviation. And then you say site has been notified to be retrained or site retrained. You need to find a system that works. We mentioned checklists, we talked about flowcharts. Find a system that works, understand the environment that you're working in, and find a system that works. So the CAPA plan needs to be adaptable as well. So yeah, because of time, I won't go too much in that. Maybe Precious just
Okay.
notes that maybe we can discuss that in our Tuesday meetings.
Okay, thank you very much. The second to the last question is, at what point do protocol deviations become a sign of poor study design rather than poor site conduct? So at what point?
Repetitive, the frequency. If you have raised the same deviation repeatedly in a short amount of a period, for instance, a CRA goes to monitor the site, they find that informed consent forms are consistently and persistently not being signed by patients. That's a huge indicator of a problem. So as a result of that, that's like a big thing. That means that site needs to be further investigated, or they need to, audit that site to confirm that they are actually following GCP requirements in terms of consenting patients. So there are a lot of indications, that can be seen, but that's like a very big thing. That's always a strong indicator.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Ma. I would like Dr. Iguda to answer this last question. What are common protocol deviations new coordinators make without realizing it? What are common protocol deviations new coordinators make without realizing it?
I'm sorry,
Dr. Iguda.
before you go, I'm just reading that question. I think I answered that question incorrectly. It says, at what point do protocol deviations become a sign of poor study design rather than
Yes.
poor site conduct? So if that deviation is a trend across all sites, that means
Oh,
there's a
okay.
problem. There's a problem with the design.
The-
Sorry about that. I didn't get that part. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much. Yes. So, Dr. Iguda, are you ready for the last question? The common protocol deviations new coordinators make without realizing it.
Okay. To answer this question, what are the common protocol deviation new coordinators makes without realizing it? So, as I mentioned earlier, most of coordinators, what they do is that especially when there is a protocol deviation, instead of discussing this deviation in a team and finding the root cause and maybe prevent further, what usually they do is they treat it as an administrative work rather than a way to prevent such occurrences. Maybe they will just write a note and then document it and file it without further discussions or escalating it. So it's one of the things, and maybe realizing so that's what the most common protocol deviation most of coordinators do make that I understood. I don't know if someone can share something else, maybe from coordinators' sides.
Okay. Our time is up now, though. We know that thank you very much, Dr. Shamsu. We know that this topic is quite broad, notwithstanding, and because of that, would continue with our knowledge sharing on the WhatsApp community platform. So if you're yet to join, kindly go to the chat section. You would see the WhatsApp link. Kindly click on it and we'll let you in so that you can join the conversation on Tuesdays where we share knowledge. I want to say a very big thank you to everyone. If you're yet to follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, please go to the chat. You'll find all our links there. So please do ensure to join. I want to say a very big thank you again to all our professionals, invited professionals who have given us a huge insight into what protocol division is and how to manage it effectively. Thank you very much. I would like to hand over now to Isaiah to round off. Please go ahead, Ma.
Alrighty. Everybody, thank you so very much. Every participant, every question, every encouragement, we really appreciate you. I want to thank Dr. Shamsu, I like the way Dr. Shamsu presents. I mean, he builds philosophy into it, he builds real life experiences into it. So it's not very theoretical. And I know he's a doctor, so he's saving the rest of us, the laymen, to helping us to understand from his perspective. And I really, really appreciate that. Thank you so much. I also want to thank Blessing Oboro. I know she's dropped off, but again, fantastic presentation. I really, really appreciate the fact that, everybody took their time off. As I said, Friday is not the best day to set up meetings, but you guys made it out. And I hope this has been worth your time. Please look out for our next webinar and also join us in our Tuesday knowledge sharing. We want to build this community in West Africa. We want to build this in Africa. We want to build this globally. We want to be able to share this knowledge. We want to build capacity. So please join us even as we do this. And until next time we see, make sure you stay well, stay safe, and then have a good weekend, and then see you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
Bye.